Hi guys. I'm still feeling a little under the weather, hence my voice, but I really wanted to try to figure out my best book of the year through a bracket kind of book battle style. So I just threw on some lipstick and hoped you would forgive the rest. I created a really pretty kind of celestial style book bracket and inputted all my books on Canva, and I really wanted to use that, but there's kind of an issue and I don't know how to fix it. Basically, when you zoom in too far, all the images get these little like error things on them. So I'm not gonna use it, which is a bummer. Hopefully I'll be able to figure that out and use it at some point in the future. But for now, I'm just showing it to you. And then we're gonna actually go and use like the bracket fight website that most other YouTubers use, which now I understand why. So I want to figure out my best book of the year by having all of the books that I read battle it out 1v1, and then at the end obviously we'll have my best book of the year. I just put in all of my books in order of the date that I read them, so it won't be like the 4 final books are my favorite 4 books of the year, final 2 books, favorite 2 books of the year, etc. It really just will be that the final book will be my favorite, because it's more than likely that even in the first round, some of my favorite books might get knocked out just because I happen to read 2 favorites in a row. And it's possible that I will have 2 or 3 stars going through multiple rounds because they're up against other 2 and 3 star books. So that's my little spiel before I get into it. I read 55 books this year. 2 of them I didn't rate. So this bracket is with 53 books. I'm obviously not the first one to do this. Many YouTubers have done this. I recently watched Kayla do this from Books and Lala. Alexis from Alexis Fully Booked does this every month as a battle of the books for her to determine what her favorite book of the month is. I know Katie Colson has done this with all of her 5-star reads to find her favorite book of all time. So it's not an original concept, but I really enjoy watching it and I hope you enjoy watching mine. So I'm gonna get all small here and just start. I'm not gonna give you a full synopsis of any of them or else this would take very long, but I'll try to give you a quick little reasoning as to why I choose each one. So the first 2 books I read this year were Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear by Shannon McGuire and Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This one's pretty easy for me. Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear was a 4-star. I've loved almost all of these books in the Wayward Children series. And Sword Heart for me was a 3-star. It just wasn't that memorable. I do want to read more of T. Kingfisher, but I think I will read maybe some of her horror and more fantasy rather than romantic fantasy, because I'm not a huge romance reader and the romance part didn't really work for me. Okay, my next pairing is also very easy. I have Why Awake Early by Mary Oliver and Unsung Requiem by C.L. Stone. Why Awake Early is a poetry collection. I love Mary Oliver. This wasn't one of my favorite collections of hers, but it is still much better than any book from this ridiculous series that I kind of rediscovered this year. I read 2 of them. I disliked both. They're not super well written. They're like a young adult, school setting, reverse harem series. And I remember when I was probably like 13 or 14, loving them and reading them every time they came out. And then I tried rereading them as an adult and realized that they are just terribly written, have very little plot. And I think there are like 10 books out and only about 6 weeks have progressed between the beginning and the end. Yeah, so this is another easy one. I gave Why Awake Early 3 stars and Unsung Requiem 2 stars. Mary Oliver is obviously winning. This is a battle between my only 1 star of the year and my first 5-star of the year. So again, very easy choice. This is another book in that The Academy series. It was even worse than the last one. I gave it 1 star. And then The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On by Franny Choi was my first 5-star of the year. It's a poetry collection that I just really connected to. And I think it's really beautifully written. Highly recommend reading it. So The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On. This is an interesting one because I actually gave Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling 3 stars and My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh 2 stars. But I don't remember anything about Fear the Flames, and there are parts of My Year of Rest and Relaxation that still stick out to me, and I remember fondly. So in this case, although I gave My Year of Rest and Relaxation a lower star rating, it's the one that I'm gonna move forward. So I read these both in the same vlog, in my traveling from London to California vlog. And again, it's gonna be pretty easy. I gave The Rainfall Market by Yu Young Guang 2 stars and Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix 4 stars. It was my first horror of the year and I really enjoyed it. I tend to give Grady Hendrix 4 stars. I think I've given all but one of his books that I've read 4 stars, so it wasn't a surprise for me, but it was still very enjoyable. So that's the one that's gonna move forward for this one. I gave both Floating Brilliant Gone by Franny Choi and Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawcett 3 stars. This poetry collection is by the same author that I gave 5 stars to, but I didn't connect in the same way. And I have enjoyed all of the Emily Wilde books, but I haven't been obsessed with them. I think I had a more enjoyable time reading Emily Wilde, so I'm gonna go with that. And I also love the cover of this. Maybe that's skewing me a little bit. I know it's not gonna be my best book of the year, so I don't mind choosing it over the other one. This is my only middle grade that I read this year. It's one of the Circle of Magic books by Tamara Pierce. It's Triss's book, versus the first romance that I read of the year, which was Savor It by Tara DeWitt. And I gave Savor It 3.5 stars. I was pleasantly surprised by Savor It. I don't tend to love contemporary romance, and there were definitely parts of this that felt very cliche, but I had a really good time reading it. I enjoyed the romance, I enjoyed the characters, and I actually put the next book in this romance series on my want to read list, and I read it later in the year. And Triss's book, I grew up reading Sandry's book over and over again, and I really loved it. And I had never read any of the other books in the series. Okay, so you can see me looking really confused here, and it's because I was pretty sure I had read all 3 of the remaining books in the Circle of Magic series this year, but it wasn't showing up on my Goodreads, and I convinced myself that I had actually read only this one this year and the other 2 in 2024. But I just went back to check, and in one of my wrap-ups from earlier in the year, I do talk about reading all 3 of these books. Yeah, it turns out that I've read 57 books this year and rated 55 of them. It doesn't really affect this video because none of them would have been my top book of the year, but yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because if for some reason you have watched all of my videos and remember that very specific piece of data from like 9 months ago, you would be confused, and now you're not. You're welcome. And all 3 of the ones that I read after childhood were very middle of the road books for me. They were comforting and fun because I knew the characters and I knew the world, but I wasn't as enthralled with them as I was when I was younger, which makes sense because they're middle grade books. But for me, I'm gonna choose Savor It. Now this is interesting because these are 2 books I really, really enjoyed this year. I already know Aqua Viva is gonna win by Clarice Lispector because I already think it's gonna be a contender for one of my best books of the year. And I gave that a glowing 5 stars. But The Gathering was a really solid vampire novel that the more I think about it, in the vlog that I read this book, I gave it 4 stars and I gave The Ministry of Time 5 stars. But I actually remember a lot more and remember reading The Gathering much more fondly than The Ministry of Time. So I think if I reread this book, it could be a 5 star. They're obviously very, very different books. Aqua Viva is more of an exploration of creativity and loneliness and communication, and it's very poetically written. And The Gathering is kind of like a fun horror thriller vampire novel, but I really enjoyed them both. Aqua Viva is gonna win this round, but that is nothing against The Gathering. I think if The Gathering had gone against most other books, it would have won. Interesting. I just went back to check my rating of The Ministry of Time, and in the video, I gave it a 5 star, but on Goodreads, I have it down as 4 stars. So I wonder if I already realized after I read that book that my feelings weren't as enduring as I thought they would be. So I guess officially, I gave both of these books 4 stars. The Ministry of Time is a sci-fi novel by Colleen Bradley, and Faithbreaker is the final installment of the Godkiller trilogy by Hannah Kaner. That trilogy is one of my favorite fantasy series that I've read in a while, and I think the whole experience of reading it is making me want to choose Faithbreaker over The Ministry of Time. But as its own book, I think I enjoyed The Ministry of Time more. So I think I'm gonna choose The Ministry of Time over Faithbreaker, although that one is a tough one. Oh no, oh no. So we have my first double 5-star matchup. So we have Bel Canto by Ann Patchett and The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman. And this is definitely one of my favorites of the series so far, The Last Devil to Die. It was heartbreaking and gut-wrenching and made me laugh and made me cry. But Bel Canto, I haven't been that engrossed in a book in years. It was just exquisitely written. It was exactly the type of book I love, where it's more of a character study than anything else, and it all takes place in one location, and I love books like that. Okay. I know I have another Richard Osman on my list later, so I'm leaning toward Bel Canto, but this Thursday Murder Club was so good that it's really hard not to choose it. Okay, I'm gonna choose Bel Canto, but with a heavy heart. Okay, so my next matchup is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar and Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage. I gave The River Has Roots 4 stars and Lost and Lassoed 2.5 stars. So this one's pretty straightforward. Lost and Lassoed was my first cowboy romance. And again, I'm not a huge romance reader, so it already goes into this pairing with a little bit of a disadvantage. But even as romances go, I didn't enjoy it as much as, let's say, Savor It, even though I enjoyed the Western cowboy-esque aspect of it. The River Has Roots is a really beautifully written short novel by Amal El-Motar, who was one of the co-writers of This Is How You Lose the Time War. And it feels like a fairy tale. And it's mostly about the power of nature and the power of sisterly love. And I had a really enjoyable time listening to it. I listened to the audiobook, which I highly recommend. I just think it's really well produced. So I'm choosing The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar. Okay. So Left of Forever by Tara DeWitt is the second in that little romance series of Savor It. And I actually liked it better. I gave this one 3.75 stars. I really loved the romance. It was my first second chance romance that I've ever read. And I just felt like the communication was really mature. One of my least favorite things about romances is the miscommunication trope and how frustrating it is when a problem could be solved with one conversation. And that didn't happen in this. So I really enjoyed that. The Story of a New Name is book 2 in the My Brilliant Friend series, and honestly, all 3 of the books that I read this year for that series kind of ran together in my head a little bit. I gave this one 4.5 stars. So of the last 3, it was my second favorite. I gave it a higher star rating than Left of Forever, but because I read 3 of the books in the same series so close together, Left of Forever is more distinct in my mind. But Elena Ferranti is such an incredible writer, and the way that she talks about female friendships and female connection is unparalleled. And so I think I do have to go with The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferranti. And here's book 3 in that same series, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay by Elena Ferranti. And I gave this one a 4 star. I remember this one because it has to do so much with Nino, and he infuriates me. I could happily never hear his name ever again. And then I gave A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Senku Mandana 3.5 stars. Cozy and romance are 2 things that I historically don't get along with super well, or they have to be done really, really well for me to love them. And this one, there were pieces that I liked. I loved the found family aspect, and I loved the connection between all the characters and how they each had their own individual friendships that made sense. I felt like each individual relationship was developed really well, but the romance didn't land super well for me. And I know everyone loves Clemmy, but I did not. I thought she was really annoying and deserved a little bit of a... She could have slept outside a few nights, if you know what I mean. She didn't need to be there so much. Okay, despite Nino's presence, I'm still gonna choose Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay by Elena Ferranti. And the final book of the series that I read, The Story of a Lost Child, was my favorite of the 3 that I read this year. It was a really beautiful conclusion to the story, and I think it wrapped up exactly how it needed to. but it's going up against My Friends by Frederick Bachman, which made me cry harder than any other book has this year. So I do have to go with My Friends by Frederick Bachman. Okay, Strange Houses by Yuketsu is a mystery, kind of very light horror, translated from Japanese, and I gave that 3 stars. And then Blue Iris is poems and essays by Mary Oliver. Again, she's my favorite poet, and I gave that 4 stars. Strange Houses was really fun, but it just didn't pull me in the way that I want a mystery to pull me in. And one of my favorite essays that I've read by Mary Oliver so far was in this collection. And I have really fond memories of reading it because I was sitting outside on the beach reading Mary Oliver, which is exactly where I want to be when I'm reading her poems. So I'm going to choose Blue Iris. And it's a battle of the Rachel Harrisons. So I read The Return by Rachel Harrison and then So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. The Return is about, I told you that I wasn't going to give synopses, but here I am. The Return is about 4 friends, and one of them goes missing and then shows up 2 years later. And they go on a trip together and kind of try to figure out if the friend who came back is the same person who left. And So Thirsty is a vampire novel. It says so right on the front. And I didn't love the side characters as much in So Thirsty. In The Return, it felt like all 4.5, kind of, if you count the husband, characters could have been the main character if more focus had been given to them. And there were none that I felt didn't need to be there. Whereas with So Thirsty, I didn't really care about the characters besides the 2 main characters. I believe I gave The Return 4 stars and So Thirsty 3 stars, and that's going to be a pretty easy choice of The Return. Oh, okay, I thought we were going to the other side first, but I guess we're continuing on this side. So Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear versus Why Awake Early. Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear was a 4 star, Why Awake Early was a 3 star, and it's a pretty easy choice for me for Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear. This is another pretty easy one. I gave My Year of Rest and Relaxation 2 stars, and The World Keeps Ending and The World Goes On 5 stars. So that's going to be my choice. Again, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls was 4 stars. Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales was a 3 star. And I'm choosing Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. Another pretty easy one, Aquaviva is going to win for me. Both of these are really incredible books, but as I said about Bel Canto, it was just in a range of its own for me this year. Okay, this is interesting. The River Has Roots versus The Story of a New Name. The River Has Roots was 4 stars. The Story of a New Name was 4.5. But I remember more about The River Has Roots because, again, The Story of a New Name was one of 3 books in the same series I read this year, and they were actually all in a bind-up, so I didn't even switch to different physical books. And I read them within like a month and a half, 2 months of each other. So it's a little muddled in my brain, but I'm still gonna choose The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferranti. Yeah, again, this is kind of an easy one. Choosing My Friends by Frederick Bachman because I hate Nino, and he was far too present in Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay. There couldn't be 2 more different books, Blue Iris and The Return. I really enjoyed both of these, but I think The Return was more of a surprise for me because I went on a little bit of a Rachel Harrison kick this year. I read 3 of her books, and this was the first of the 3. And then before that, I've only read 1, and I gave it, I think, a 2. I really didn't enjoy it. So I wasn't expecting much from this, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I've read Mary Oliver many times before. Most of the time I love her writing, and it wasn't surprising for me, although it was very enjoyable to read. But I think I'm gonna have to go with The Return. Okay. It feels weird choosing between a poetry collection and an actual story, although Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear is very short. I just feel like it goes against my instincts to choose a poetry collection over a fully fledged story, but The World Keeps Ending and The World Goes On made me feel seen in a way that a poetry collection hasn't in a really long time. So I do think I'm going to be choosing that. I'm choosing Aquaviva. I already know it. I loved Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. I think it's my favorite of Grady Hendrix's books so far. But again, Aquaviva was written in such a unique way. I've never read a novel written like that before. I didn't mention it's epistolary, so it's actually all written as a letter. And that book is so highlighted and underlined. I couldn't get enough of her writing. So choosing Aquaviva. And then Bel Canto versus the Story of a New Name. Again, I'm choosing Bel Canto. It was just one of the most beautifully written books. It felt like it was written for me, like the exact type of book that I love to read. So Bel Canto it is. And then My Friends versus The Return. I loved My Friends. I gave it 5 stars. I cried, but I think it's a book that I'm going to need to reread because I don't remember some of it, especially in the middle. I think I tore through it so quickly that I didn't really absorb it as much as I should have. So it's a book that I really want to reread. And again, Frederick Bachman is my favorite author. So I had no doubt this was going to be at least a 4-star. But Rachel Harrison was really a surprise for me. So shockingly, I'm going to go with The Return by Rachel Harrison. I mean, I'm going with Aquaviva. But I adored The World Keeps Ending and The World Goes On. And again, if you haven't read it and you're into poetry, please read this. And again, like I'm going to choose Bel Canto, but The Return put up a really good fight, and I'm kind of shocked that it made it this far. Oh no, this is what I've been dreading, because I think in different circumstances, these would be my top 2 of the year. So having to choose between them now hurts me. Can I do the other side and then come back to this one? I don't think that's how it works. This is the hardest it's been so far. And that sounds so dramatic. We're just choosing between books. And no one is making me do this. I am making me do this. So I really only have me to blame. But since I am making me do this, I must actually do it. I'm stalling. Okay. They were both written so incredibly. I annotated both of them. Bel Canto is more of a story that you follow and has a beginning, a middle, and end. And it builds up tension in such a beautiful way that at the end, you know, okay, plane. Rude. Skedaddle. Anyway, I thought I was going to choose Aquaviva, but now I'm talking about Bel Canto and I'm kind of convincing myself the other way. It just had such a buildup because you knew that there had to be some conclusion. Like the bubble of this little life that they created in this house together couldn't end well for everybody. The real world had to come in and pop that bubble somehow. And you knew it was going to happen, but you didn't know how it was going to happen or who was going to be hurt in the end. And then it was devastating. Aquaviva, on the other hand, felt like an entirely new type of writing. I've never read anything like it. The writing was so beautiful and felt like it was reaching into my soul and expressing things that I didn't know how to express myself. But it isn't really a story. I mean, it kind of is, but a lot of it is interpretation. My head wants to say Bel Canto, but I think my heart is saying Aquaviva. And that's what I'm going to go with. Ah! I hated that. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. So now we have 2 3-stars going up against each other. Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. That was my first Brandon Sanderson. And How to Survive a Horror Story by Mallory Arnold. One is like a fantasy adventure story and one is a horror story. So I'm going to go with Tress of the Emerald Sea. I just had a better time reading it. I think overall it is just a better book. So although I gave them both 3 stars, I think as a piece of art, Tress of the Emerald Sea is better. These are 2 nonfiction books. We have 50 Words for Snow by Nancy Campbell and The Secret Life of a Cemetery by Benoit Gallo. I gave The Secret Life of a Cemetery 2 stars and 50 Words for Snow 3 stars. They were both an interesting concept. The Secret Life of a Cemetery goes into the history and current state of Père Lachaise, which is one of the biggest cemeteries in Paris. And 50 Words for Snow, the author talks about words for snow in 50 different languages and kind of goes into their etymology and why each of these cultures needs different words for the same thing. And I enjoyed 50 Words for Snow more, so that is what's gonna win. Okay, I have another 3-star battle. We have Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Iyamide and One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. One Dark Window is a fantasy romance, and Ace of Spades is a young adult mystery, kind of dark academia style. Both of them were fun, quick, semi-immersive reads, but neither of them were very impactful. I think Ace of Spades had more important things to say, but I think I enjoyed One Dark Window more. I'm choosing One Dark Window, although I think Ace of Spades is objectively a better book. Now I have Bluets by Maggie Nelson, which was a 4-star, and The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins, which was a 3-star. The Heiress is a mystery thriller, and Bluets is short essays, not even essays, just Maggie Nelson's ponderings on the color blue, which was really unique. I really enjoyed reading it. The writing didn't hit as much as I wanted it to, but I still thought it was really well written and really beautiful insights, while The Heiress was a quick, satisfying mystery thriller wrapped up in a bow at the end, but it wasn't anything that I have really thought about since. So I'm choosing Bluets by Maggie Nelson. So here we have one of my worst books of the year. I have Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig, and I gave it 1.5 stars, and The English Understandable by Helen DeWitt, which I gave 4 stars. So this one's gonna be quite obvious. Two Twisted Crowns is the sequel to One Dark Window, and I couldn't handle the characters in the second installment. I feel like just a new romance was thrown at us just because the first, will they, won't they had already happened, and they needed another enemies to lovers to keep people entertained. The writing was terrible, the plot made no sense, and the finale could have been completely avoided if the male protagonist was not an idiot. So that was Two Twisted Crowns. The English Understandable is a short story about this woman kind of dealing with the aftermath of something that happens when her wealthy parents leave her. I sped through that book in a few hours. It's really short. It was really engaging. I thought it was really interesting the way it was written because it was written kind of in 3 different ways within one novella. That's an easy win to The English Understandable. Now I have another Clarice Lispector, Daydreams and Drunkenness of a Young Lady, and this is one of the Penguin mini classics. So it's actually 3 short stories in one little tiny bind-up, versus Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. I gave Daydream and Drunkenness of a Young Lady 4 stars and Last Night at the Telegraph Club 4.5 stars. I enjoyed the short stories, but Last Night at the Telegraph Club was an incredibly written book. I was shocked by how much I liked it, considering it's a young adult book, and I loved the setting in San Francisco. So Last Night at the Telegraph Club is definitely the winner here. Oh, fun. I have another singular author matchup. I have Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier versus The Breakthrough by Daphne du Maurier. The Breakthrough is a short story, and I gave it 3 stars, I believe. And Jamaica Inn is a novel, and I gave it 4 stars. Daphne du Maurier shines in her atmosphere, and I just don't think that something as short as The Breakthrough gave her enough time to really build that. So Jamaica Inn is the winner here. We have another Rachel Harrison, Such Sharp Teeth, which I gave 5 stars, and The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst, which I gave, I believe, 3 stars. Let me double check that. Oh yes, I gave it 2.5 stars because of an unnecessary Myrrh horse birthing scene at the end, which really I did not love. So The Spell Shop is another cozy fantasy, cozy romantasy, and Such Sharp Teeth is a horror novel about a werewolf, and it was my favorite Rachel Harrison so far. It was so fun to read. I love her style of horror. It's a little campy. I know that things are going to work out in the end, even if it doesn't work out the way I expect it to. So the anxiety that I usually get when reading horror or thriller books isn't there as much. I love her character building, and I especially love her female friendships that she has in her stories. So Such Sharp Teeth is definitely the winner here. Now I have 2 books that kind of have a similar vibe to me, which is they're both kind of dark academia, wannabe fantasy, kind of gritty, but not really books with a lot of plot holes. So we have Immortal Consequences by Ivy Marie and Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris. I gave Immortal Consequences 2 stars and Strange Beasts 3 stars. Immortal Consequences is more of a magic school setting with a mystery and deadly games, whereas Strange Beasts is a Sherlockian mystery, kind of horror, a little bit like sprinkles of horror. And I just think Strange Beasts was more interesting. I liked the magic system better. I liked the characters better. I cared about what happened more, although it wasn't a ton. I still only gave it 3 stars. It's the sort of thing that if there was a sequel, which I assume there will be, I would pick it up as an audiobook for when I'm like doing chores around the house, but I wouldn't go out of my way to read it physically. But in this instance, Strange Beasts is gonna win. Oh no. Okay, we have another 5 versus 5 star battle. So we have The Impossible Fortune by Richard Osman versus Babel by R.F. Kuang. I know I'm the last person in the world to read Babel, or Babel. I think technically it's Babel, but... And then The Impossible Fortune is the most recent of the Thursday Murder Club mysteries. I gave them both 5 stars. They are very different. The Thursday Murder Club is like a uplifting kind of cozy fantasy series about elderly people in a retirement village, and Babel is a dark academia tackling colonization and translation and international inequality. So very, very different books, both 5 stars. I really enjoyed both of these. The Impossible Fortune made me cry and made me laugh. Babel made me think more, for sure. I think Babel is a more important book and it shouldn't be out this early, but I have to choose The Impossible Fortune. This series has my heart, and knowing that on the other side, it got knocked out immediately against Bel Canto, I need the series to have its redemption. It's a bummer that in both instances it went up against another 5 star, but The Impossible Fortune is gonna move forward for me. And then my last one is Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector. I gave it 3 stars, but it's not against anything, so it's just gonna go automatically until it's time to actually go against something. So I have Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson and 50 Words for Snow by Nancy Campbell, both 3 stars. I love languages, I love words, and this was a really enjoyable nonfiction for me. There are things that I wished had been done differently, but it's definitely the sort of thing that I would pick up again. And so I'm gonna choose 50 Words for Snow. This one is a pretty easy win for Bluets by Maggie Nelson over One Dark Window. This one is a little more difficult. The English Understand Wool was a 4 star. Last Night at the Telegraph Club was 4.5. I just was more invested in Last Night at the Telegraph Club because it's a full-length novel, while The English Understand Wool was pretty short. And I really enjoyed the atmosphere of reading about San Francisco. So I'm gonna choose Last Night at the Telegraph Club. Although I love Daphne du Maurier, Jamaica Inn is no Rebecca, and I'm gonna choose Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. And this is a super easy win for The Impossible Fortune. And then again, Near to the Wild Heart just went through straight away. Here, I'm gonna choose Bluets by Maggie Nelson. And then here, I think I'm gonna choose Such Sharp Teeth. That half a star really pushed it over the edge for me. And then finally, Near to the Wild Heart actually has something to go against. This is also by Clarice Lispector, who wrote Aquaviva and Drunkenness, Daydream and Drunkenness of a Young Lady or something, the short story. This I only gave 3 stars. It took me almost the entire year to read, and it's the sort of thing that I am gonna need to reread it several times because I could not grasp everything it was trying to say. So here, The Impossible Fortune is going to win. And then here, again, Such Sharp Teeth is definitely gonna be the winner. Ooh, and our last round on this side, The Impossible Fortune versus Such Sharp Teeth. If The Impossible Fortune was the only Richard Osman I had ever read, I think it would win. But since it's not my favorite of the Thursday Murder Club series, I mean, all but one have been 5 stars. Actually, maybe 2 have been 4, 3 have been 5, but I love these characters so much. How can I not choose them? But Such Sharp Teeth was so unexpectedly good, and I kind of love that it was a standalone. It was my highest rated horror of the year. At least this is working out well where it gets harder and harder to make these decisions, because that's how it should be. And the top 4 actually ended up all being 5 stars, which is really nice. Okay, just sitting here is not choosing for me. I'm gonna have to cut out like 5 minutes of me just sitting in silence trying to figure out which is my favorite. Something I appreciate about Rachel Harrison is that in her horror books, she doesn't rely on the main character not telling anyone what's going on. The main characters are like, I don't know what the fuck is happening, but I'm definitely gonna tell these people that I'm close to, even if they don't believe me. And I love that. But I just love the characters in the Thursday Murder Club so much. And it made me cry, and it made me laugh, and they're all so sweet. I don't know what to do. I have to tell myself that this is okay because they're both going to be in my top 10 of the year anyway, and just choose. And I think I'm choosing... I'm choosing The Impossible Fortune. Okay. And then as my final, I think I have to go with Aquaviva. The choices for the top 2 was harder than the final choice, but yeah, I'm gonna go with Aquaviva by Clarice Lispector. So Aquaviva by Clarice Lispector is my best book of the year. I'm sure this could change on any given day. If I did this in a few hours and I was like hungry or something, maybe this would change. But as of right this moment, my best book of 2025 was Aquaviva by Clarice Lispector. If you felt differently about any of these books, feel free to let me know. If I hated on a book that you really love, I'm sorry, it's just my opinion, and it's all for entertainment purposes, so please don't yell at me. So thanks for watching this entirely too stressful bracket. I don't know if I'll do this again. It was fun, but it also stressed me out. I'll be filming some more like end of year type videos, although now it's the beginning of 2026, but oh well. End of my reading year wrap up situation, and I hope to see you then. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.